Just in case you're not sure, I'm Jayce, and this is Rehab. And it's a pleasure to be able to share this time with you, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
She arrived 2 days ago. I arrived 2 hours ago. And she's gone in a short time. And I'll be going back this morning. Not this morning, tonight at some point. So yeah, it's great to reflect on this beautiful, lyrical, severe, powerful, haunting, poetic project that reaches beyond our borders and reaches into our hearts, or in my viscera, and sort of shakes my being. This is when I start to cry. I'll try not to. It reaches beyond oceans and cultures and directly into us and our notions of being. So at least it does, for myself. And we're going to start simply with the cover of the book. So where is this book? Holding this book in your hands.
Yeah, I should be holding a copy, actually.
Yes, there, she'll bring it. But anyways, just imagine she's holding a copy in her hands. How does it feel after 10 years of living and working through this project? There you go.
Oh, thank you.
You can sign it while you're at it.
Thank you. So that's the book. Well, let me start first by thanking everyone for being here. And I would like to thank the Polygon Gallery for this opportunity, as well as the Belkin Gallery and our gallery for sponsoring this event. Now, the book is, it's part of a research creation project, and the book is one component. The other is an exhibition, a multimedia exhibition, video, photography, printed matter, that's going to open September 7 at the Montréal Art Intercultures. Now, how does it feel to have the book printed? It feels good.
Okay, next question.
It feels good.
That was easy one.
I'll be honest with you. When I started photographing from the window of moving vehicles in Palestine, I wasn't planning to publish a book at the beginning. I was born in the West Bank, in Jenin area. And I finished my high school in Jenin High School. Then I received a scholarship from Damascus University. After I finished, the Israelis won't allow me to get back. I got stranded between Jordan and Syria, then I migrated here. After 25 years, I went back to Palestine as a Canadian with a visa to my house, to my mom, to my family. So the shock when I entered the country, the shock, what prompted me even to change the medium that I was working with, which was painting and drawing, and I shifted to photography. So the window of the car, that's through which I started seeing the destruction of the country and started taking photographs. So from 2010 to 2020, I accumulated a great number. So as part of this project, the whole book idea came about. If I answered.
Well done, yes. Dr. Nazzal, you did a very good job of that.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
Okay, it works. Amazing technology. So you touched upon, you switched mediums.
Yeah.
And now you're working in photography and some video and sometimes installation and graphics. Why photography with the history of the violence of representation of photography and all the histories that photography is complicit in, the colonial histories, the invasions of the North Africa, and of the that whole history of Orientalism. Well, why photography, and why black and white?
Why photography? Like if I would think about the paintings and drawing when I used to paint and draw, it's really more subjective, the medium of painting and drawing. and photography is more objective. Still, there is a subjectivity, of course. There is a selection aspect when we photograph, we frame things, we exclude, we include. But photography, it's more like, I wouldn't say evidence, documentation, archival. It has several aspects that other medium or other media doesn't have. And I felt the urge, the changes in Palestine and photography, actually, the settler-colonial project in Palestine depended on mapping the country during the British mandate of Palestine, or the colonial rule after First World War. The Zionist photographers used to photograph Palestine as tourists, aerial photography, as well as each town, each community. So photography played a role, aside from even Orientalism and how Orientalists photographed the Palestinians selectively, what they want to photograph, how they want to represent the Palestinians. For me, as a Palestinian indigenous person, that's my self-representation. I am representing myself, and this medium, I found it significant.
So it's a lot to do with its relationship to reality, or realities on the ground.
Absolutely, the reality on the ground and the changes, I'll go back to the term destruction. When you enter your country, within 25 years, you see the hilltops are raised. The streets are going across some settlers' roads, across the towns and villages. I felt the urge of documenting even this, because it's in a state of change. Every year, every month, the situation in Palestine.
Every day, yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. What happened? There we go, got it. Thanks. Just keeping you exercised, okay. So the title, Driving in Palestine, I misread it as Driving to Palestine. So back in the day, well, even before my time, one could drive from Beirut to Jerusalem or Cairo to Jerusalem in a matter of hours. Now, it's impossible to even take that route, even though some of the travel guides say you can, but they give it ample warning, like there will be restrictions and delays at borders. But with all the dividing of Palestine, all the walls that have been built, all the borders that keep on expanding, and the settlers, colonies, and all the other building that's going on that is over top of Palestinian villages that were once villages and orchards. What is left of Palestine?
It's people. Palestine is there. I mean, I often ask this question. Just 2 days ago, we had an event at Concordia University, and someone compared even the conditions to the indigenous people here. And one thing about Palestine was colonized for 200 years by the Crusaders, 400 years by the Ottomans, 30 years by the British, and now 70 years by the Israeli state, the European Zionists who invaded the country. And I don't mean the Jewish Palestinian Arabs, because they're part of the society. So what remains the people of that land, of that country. There is destruction, yes. That's like we cannot deny the destruction. Now, the mapping and the map, who creates maps, and why the maps? In general, states create map to divide this planet we are on. Palestine, and I drew this map without any borders, because the borders in the Arab world were created by France and Britain after the First World War. With a ruler and a pen, they divided the Arab world, Syria, Lebanon for France, Iraq, Jordan, Palestine. Britain ruled these countries. They created the borders between these states. Here, without any borders. My father and grandfather before him used to travel from Palestine to Syria, to Iraq, to Lebanon. They used to come from Lebanon to drink coffee. Drink coffee on the north of Palestine. All this has changed. And the whole project of driving in Palestine, actually, it has a twisted aspect to it, because it turned into prison, basically, Palestine. And not just one open prison, it's into pentostones, like several prisons within one large prison. 48, when the Nakba took place. I don't know how many of you is familiar with the Nakba, which is the catastrophe when the State of Israel was established over the ruin of 2/3 of the Palestinian population. Their properties, their towns, their villages turned into refugees. To this day, now 6 million Palestinian refugees across the Arab world and everywhere, while their property was taken over by mainly European settlers, mainly. When the Nakba happened, the State of Israel was established, Palestine was cut into half. Then two-thirds Israel claimed, the other third, the West Bank and Gaza. So that was the first division between the Palestinians. The refugees across the Arab world, then the 1967, then 1948. In 1967, the expansion, Israeli settler expansion extended to the West Bank and Gaza, even the Golan Heights as well. And we were sealed from the Arab world. We were taken away from this. If you look at the map, Palestine, part of this Arab world, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. It was sealed from all sides. That's it. My father, who used to take olive oil, to ship olive oil to Baghdad or to Damascus, that's it. That's the end of it. Cannot leave without an individual permit. And the individual permit, it's not when you apply for it you can get it. It depends. The occupation authorities, if you have any ties to the resistance movement, then you're not granted that permit. We can talk for hours about this, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get, some of the stuff we'll get, we will return to. The dedication. So the book's dedication reflects on also you being a mother. True. And the seemingly impossible, incongruous juxtaposition of a Palestinian woman giving birth at a checkpoint, at a military checkpoint, as an act of life-affirming revolution in resistance to the oppressor, like in these horrid conditions. So as an artist, a mother, an educator, how do you want this book to be activated in this colonial world that we are, that is so pervasive and so destructive and deflective of the Palestinian experience?
Well, first, the dedication for the Palestinian women who gave life on checkpoints. And this is between 2000 and 2005, 67 women gave birth on checkpoints because they couldn't reach the hospital, because checkpoints, the soldiers on checkpoints, they colonized the time of the people. You see a line of cars for hours sometimes. At one point, there were 600 checkpoints within the West Bank, which is less than 6,000 square kilometers. Like every 2 kilometers, sometimes less, there's a checkpoint. So women give life, continue to give life. How to go around the checkpoints, many women start to go to the hospital earlier, and childbirth at home, many of the women, yeah.
But this notion of checkpoint, if you haven't encountered these checkpoints, it sounds rather benign. You think it might be like immigration control at the airport, where you show your papers, your passport, and they let you through. But it may be like that for people with foreign passports, especially if they don't look Arab. But for anybody that has any association with Arabness or Palestinians especially, that are trying to pass through, they're often denied or at least delayed for, it can be several hours, it could be overnight, right?
That's right. That's right. There is no stability even in this system of checkpoints. I used to go to Nablus, for example, and there is in the north one checkpoint in the south. So the entrance and the exit, 2 checkpoints. One year when I went, we were not allowed to cross by car. Mm-hmm. We have to leave our car inside the city, then cross walking, and take another car after the checkpoint. The year after, we were not allowed to walk just by car. So there is changes always in these systems, some of them low-tech, some high-tech. Inside the city of Al-Khalil, there is cameras that recognize the faces, face recognition. Yeah. This one, for example, this checkpoint, beyond the checkpoint is Nazareth. We go to Nazareth 20 minutes. And from this side is Jenin. No Palestinian is allowed to cross from here. And why is this checkpoint established? It's just for Palestinian workers, cheap labor to work in Israel. That is the whole point of it. I'm not sure my son is here, but in 2006, I took my kids to visit, to visit the town of their father that was ethnically cleansed entirely. We went to see his house, his family house in Tiberias. Not a single Palestinian was there. So we went from Jenin to Jerusalem, Ramallah, Jerusalem, then to Tiberias. And it took us about 4 hours at the time. When we finished the trip, we were exhausted. They were very young. 25 minutes from Nazareth to Jenin. So we had to go back 4 hours or go through this. So we were exhausted. I took the kids and I said, I am going to go across this checkpoint. So the soldiers there communicated with their superiors and whatever. I said, I'm not leaving. I have 3 little kids. After 25 minutes, they allowed us. We took a taxi just across the street, basically. So the horrific checkpoints that capture the time of the people, students, workers, farmers, sick people. It just torture, basically.
Well, we'll stay with this photo. these are just a few photos from the book that we selected for the talk, but all of these photos are in the book. So when we look at these photos as viewers or readers, we fill them with our own interpretations, our own imaginations, our own readings of them, based on our own perceptions, and knowledge that we carry with us. So everybody reads them a little bit differently, depending on where they're coming from, literally and figuratively. So in a sense, they're fictions. They become fictions in our minds because we're interpreting them. And they're already, one step removed. They're representations of something on the ground. But the feelings that you get, are real when you're looking at these, though distanced. So how do you reconcile the distance between the actuality and the fictions that we're creating when we're looking at them?
Well, probably the question is to you. How do you reconcile? Because that's my reality. Like, I lived it since I was a little kid.
Or do you worry about it? I mean, maybe it's not an issue.
Probably Palestinians sometimes, how they manage to keep going and to live their life because they look at other people who struggled before them and still struggling. Indigenous people across the world, Black people, marginalized people. So it's not us only. Mm-hmm. So these images, for example, this surveillance, I guess it's everyone's issue now, the surveillance, although this is a conventional form of surveillance. Probably we're going to talk about it later.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Driving in Palestine. So you write, all of the photographs in this book were captured in motion. So this, the confronting or engaging with motion and with the opposite of it, of being stuck, or either forcibly being moved or forcibly being stuck. So forcibly being moved as in the 400 to 500 villages that were destroyed, in the creation of the State of Israel, and the 150 that have been destroyed since by more settler colonialism. People forced to flee that were expelled from their lands, but also, so that type of motion. And then, later on, I think we'll come back to talk about samud, or the notion of staying put on your land as an act of resistance. So Palestinians are caught between the two of these polarities and they seem to be the perfect example, the epitome of the interstitial subject that can never be rooted in one place, that is always in between, and defining the in-betweenness while trying to go from A to B or back to one place that was never the same, that will never be the same. Do you think that idea of motion is a trope or something that can that is key to the Palestinian condition?
I guess it's a key for everyone, not just the Palestinians. Motion and change. Nothing is in a state of stillness at all. Now, taking the photographs as still photographs in motion, it is revealing, in a sense, relates to time as well, mm-hmm. and time in Palestine. And I mentioned previously how 100 years in the life of a people or of a country is really equivalent to 1 year in our lives as individuals. So there is a change, there is a motion in the history of Palestine and the Palestinians. But I'll be honest with you, I cannot stop to photograph a checkpoint or a watchtower. I can't, because there are many incidents of shooting on people from watchtowers. So there is an aspect of also capturing the images in motion, because that was the possibility only, to be just to capture the image before any soldier even look at you. And I have many photographs of soldiers with their hands. I was stopped many times, the camera almost taken from me, the photographs erased, the card was taken, etc. That's normal in the country. I hope I answered you.
Don't worry. You're doing fine. So as you mentioned before, the Nakba, what the Nakba is, the Nakba continues on a daily basis, 75 years and counting, or not counting, depending. And the act of multi-layered oppressions continues to get more complex and more layered, and more oppressions upon oppressions, including the surveillance, which is becoming ever more sophisticated. You mentioned the facial recognition that is at all the checkpoints and all the points of entry and throughout the occupied territories. And the surveilling even of the olive groves, which are also destroyed, and streams and natural water sources are filled in with concrete. So it's an act of erasure of all things Palestinian. It's part of the eradication plan that apartheid is at the core of apartheid, basically, to do as much destruction and fragmentation as possible. There was, in one of the photos that we might come to, there's a graffiti that says, "We refuse to die." So that goes hand in hand with this idea of samud, or steadfastness, staying alive, staying on the ground, staying there, trying to survive. And then Muhammad al-Kurd, at one of his essay, he says, "The dignity negating the cement." Or as another essayist who happens to be your daughter says, "A refusal to forget that Palestine is not made up of the fragmented territories and roads we see today, but of a diverse people whose lands stretch from Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea." So how can the perceptions of the people here change to be able to help end the occupation?
It's a very complex question when it comes to Canada in particular, because Canada was part of creating our problem from the very beginning. The Secretary of State, the Foreign Minister, the Canadian in 1947, he drafted, Mr. Pearson, he drafted the partition plan. And he actually convinced many of Latino American countries to vote with it. So Canada officially played the role of dividing the people in that country. That's the very beginning of it. And it continued to this day. Canada Park, 1967, occupied land according to international law. It's a war crime what Canada committed by establishing a recreational park over the ruins of 3 Palestinian villages, where 10,000 Palestinians were forced out of their villages in 1967. And the recreational park, Canada Park, established over. And these are examples. Currently, there is a bird sanctuary in the name of Stephen Harper Bird Sanctuary being established in the north of Palestine, north of Tabriz, where the town of my children's father. Canada, just a few days ago, tried to block an advisory advisory, what do you call it?
Committee, the advisory committee for the UN?
Advisory Committee for the International Court of Justice.
ICC.
About IGC, about the situation in Palestine. They try to block it. You don't comprehend sometimes why, but if we go to the root, the Canadian state is a settler-colonial state established on the expense of the indigenous people and their dispossession and the theft of land and the genocide and the residential school, and the list is long. So what connects the Israeli state with the Canadian state is one foundation, because the Israeli state is built on the dispossession of the Palestinian people, the expulsion and the genocide and the continued genocide. What is happening in Gaza now, the prison of Gaza? I have no words to describe it. I went last year to Gaza. I don't have words. 2.2 million Palestinians under siege since 2007. The food is calculated by calories by the Israelis, keeping them, as one advisor of Ehud Olmert at the time, Israel Prime Minister, will keep them on diet. We won't let them die, but on diet. So they calculate how much calorie they need to keep them, and they allow to get in. From the air, from the sea, and from land, under siege. Over 67% unemployment. No words, really, no words to describe the situation in there. This is a Nakba. What's happening in Jerusalem, a continuous Nakba. In 2021, the world learned about what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, where the ethnic cleansing continued. In Sheikh Jarrah, where settlers come and just kick you out of your house and they take it over because there is a divine power promised us. So here in this photograph and the previous one, the previous photograph of Burin. This is a village around Nablus. It's a beautiful, stunning village. You see the hill there. Armed settlers came there and began attacking the villagers in this village. Beside it, just close, Hawara made international headline 3 months ago when armed settlers attacked the houses, burned houses while people inside them, burned cars. It made headlines, but this village always being attacked. The horrific thing is burning the olive trees. And that's one of the images of the olive trees. So yes, it is continuous Nakba. To what end, I really don't know. 7 million Palestinians now live between the river, the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, and 7 million Jewish Israelis. The 7 million Palestinians live on 12% of Palestine, and the other 7 million on the rest. And the 12% even, they want them out of it. So, Sumud, you mentioned the term which entered the dictionary. It's steadfastness. That's what keeps the Palestinians going. They are steadfast. They are in their land. Mm-hmm. They're part of the land. Because no settler can understand the relation between the Palestinians and the land. No soldier with a gun can understand that relation. And regardless of 75 years of attempts to cut these ties to destroy this relation between the Palestinians and their land. It's unsuccessful. They burn a tree, we plant another one. They demolish a house, we build it again. And it's continuous. There are stories of people who actually rebuilt their homes 5, 6 times after being demolished. The only state on this planet that demolishes houses. 60,000 homes since 1967. Just you spend your life building a house, then suddenly a bulldozer. And in Jerusalem, you have to pay the bill for the demolishing of your house. Or you destroy it yourself, you demolish it yourself. Anyways.
Okay, I'll make this one quick. It's the same, as picked these photographs, or we picked them, I was thinking more of that same question of, they are kind of they're signifiers, they're kind of a ghost mise en scène, like you don't see, there's so much that these represent that you don't see. Mm-hmm. They imply a lot of what happens, before and after in these sites. So is it possible, like, how do you connect with what you don't see as a viewer or a reader?
You have to imagine.
Good answer.
You have to imagine it, I'm sure. I mean, black and white photography, and you asked previously about this, it really has some historical aspect to it, because it's the beginning of image making. So whenever we see black and white, somehow our mind goes to the past. And when the black and white photography about violence, whether visible or invisible, it connects us to previous violence as well that we have seen, wars and destruction.
Yeah, I was really struck, and when you pass through checkpoints, you're really struck by the casualness and the offhandedness of the soldiers, many of them very young men, many of them from America, from Canada, from Europe, that speak perfect English, that being their first language, or French, and they've gone back to support the occupation. And Canadians as well have gone to serve in the Israeli army. But this casualness is very disarming. That it's there's these smirks, these gestures, the arrogance that they portray, and versus the actual brutality that they enact. So they are shot and they are photographed. They are photographed, not shot. They are photographed as separate from the land. They are definitely sensed as being above and separated from the land, whereas the Palestinians are photographed and sensed as being with or in or of the land. Mm. And that's apparent in, the images, without saying so, it reveals that reality of the colonizers and the colonized, basically. That's right. And how distinct they are from one another and from the land that they're on or above.
That's right. Supremacy, the Jewish supremacy in Palestine that we witness now, it manifests. I don't know if any of you have read the book, The Architecture of Occupation by E.L. Wiseman, who described the architecture of occupation, how it's always in the hilltops, where the vision of the settler, they don't see below. They don't build colonies, illegal colonies in lower land on the hilltop. And that manifests also on the checkpoints and the watchtowers that we see. Always the vision is higher than the Palestinian. They don't see them even, but that's what it reflects, basically.
Yeah. for sure. So this fragmentation is carving up the land and the layering of the technology, the basic technology, the walls, the towers, the turrets, the bunkers, the roads, the poles, the lines and fences are the more basic kind, but then layered on top of it, on top of these checkpoints, barricades, barriers, roadblocks, the tanks, the armed vehicles patrolling and manning the hilltops and the barriers and the roadblocks. And then now they have developed into a multinational global industry is the drones. The drones, the surveillance, the facial recognition, the software, the cameras, and all of these more or less controlled by the panopticon. The towers that are everywhere, that surveil but are difficult to see inside but can surveil around them. That this, this is a very archaic disciplinary concept of the panopticon, but it's meant to, disempower the subject so that they know they're being seen, but they cannot do anything about it. So the inmates can't see into the tower, but in this case, it's not inmates, it's people trying to lead their daily lives. The towers, the walls, trying to live their daily lives, because daily life is much more than getting through a checkpoint. There's rich lives that people have. They have gardens, they have families, they have schools, until things are destroyed, and then, like you said, they rebuild them. So this is a quote from the current and former and now current Prime Minister, Netanyahu. He says, the only way to manage your borders, talking to leaders of the world, is to follow our model. And this is at the basis of their industrial military complex, exporting repression, the different forms of software, the Pegasus, the Albit military systems and the management of those systems, this type of oppression, repression, surveillance, and control technology and tools they're selling to India, in Latin America, throughout the Western world. It's being sold and used in Europe, and they're hiring Israeli personnel to manage the monitoring of the migrants coming into the country, the surveilling of them, the facial recognition. So this is also not just a huge military buildup of oppressive states, or somewhat more benign Western states using oppressive technology that are becoming more oppressive. It's also a way to buy loyalty with these states so that they vote in favor of Israel whenever votes come up at the UN, or just supporting them economically. So Palestine has been used since before 48, since 47, like you mentioned, when the Zionists, the proto-Israel forces went from village to village photographing and taking notes about which villages had what number of men and young boys that might fight against the Zionist forces and the militias, the paramilitary militias, and which villages to destroy first and which people to execute first. So it's been going on for, over 75 years. I don't know, was there a question there? Yeah, Palestine's been used as a laboratory, okay? We know over and over and over again.
Yeah, it is a lab, and this is not new. After each attack on Gaza, the weapons and surveillance technology sales increase rapidly in Israel. And they pride themselves for marketing tested weapons and equipments. It became known, it's not a new fact. The borders, the security procedures on airports and borders, the weapons themselves, all kinds of weapons, even prohibited by international law, they were used. Even the crowd control weapons where I got shot by a sniper with the .22 millimeter Colt. They were testing those as well on protesters. So yeah, we are like the lab being used. However, We resist every day, even with a stone. We resist.
This is the architecture of dispossession or attempted genocide based on fear and hate. That's the basics, foundation of apartheid. The carceral, what's referred to in the book as a carceral geography. So yeah, in that it becomes, in a way, must become claustrophobic, this imposition about, especially when you're trying to move.
Yeah. Yeah. The creator and designer of the watchtower, the Panopticon, he's a British. In the 1890s, he designed this Panopticon, which basically, whether you have one guard or you don't, people will have the sense that they're being watched, regardless. And many of these watchtowers, we don't know if there are soldiers or aren't. Although the majority of them, there are cameras. So creating the sense that you are being watched, you're being controlled. This, from the 1800s, which was first in India, was realized, this project, this design. It functions in Palestine side by side with the electronic, I would say, surveillance, the face recognition, the Bagasses, the Khashoggi, by the way, the journalist, his wife had that Bagasses in her phone, and he was assassinated based on that in Turkey. So all oppressive regimes being supplied with this high-tech surveillance technology.
Let's have a drink after. Okay. A quote by Gilles Deleuze. It's a universal system, not referring specifically to Palestine though, of a universal system of deformation. And then Stephen Sheehy, who writes a very astute and insightful text in the books, I'm quoting him here, this deformation project itself as a natural vision of the unfortunate logic of occupation without end. So it becomes normalized in the West because that is, we see the benign, we have a benign interpretation of it. And it's accepted without question and wholeheartedly because the Western media has provided more or less that narrative without supporting other narratives, countering that for so many years. Because when you can interview a person with, perfect English, a soldier on a checkpoint or a settler that's from Brooklyn or from Toronto, they're very empathetic. They can speak to you in the language you understand. But when you speak to somebody with a Palestinian accent, it's more, okay, well, they're the other. It's the media that has othered, the Arab and the Palestinian in response to this affinity with supremacy, basically, European white supremacy. Jaspierre Puar, who wrote in the book, the assumption that the goal of settler colonialism is necessarily elimination. And then Stephen goes on to say, this is the international condition of settler colonialism in Palestine. We are asked to make sense of the illogical, the irrational, and the violent, and to translate it as logical, natural, and normal. So this, I don't know if you've noticed, but I get frustrated and angry a lot watching the most banal TV shows, and they feature somebody just happens to have come back from serving in the Israeli forces or working on a kibbutz, and it's just normal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's normalized in the media and the film industry. Not to be shocked, there is about 5,000 to 6,000 Canadians who are settlers illegally in the West Bank. Settlers, violent settlers. So if I go back to Jasper Parr, who actually might be here in UBC.
Here? Oh, here.
No, in UBC. You know.
That's you?
Yeah, I'm here. You're Jasper? You? Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Okay, you're used to it.
Oh my God,
There you go.
Jasper. I was talking about you today to friends here. I said she might be in UBC.
Okay.
It's a pleasure.
You never know who's
so-
lurking in the crowd,
Yeah, I know.
for better or worse.
Wow. So yes, Jasper actually revolutionized our understanding, I would say, of settler colonialism. She's here and she probably can speak to that, but it's not necessarily elimination of the indigenous people, the settler colonial project. It also, in addition to elimination, it's debilitating, it's maiming the indigenous, make them suffer. And I'll give you the mic. You probably you'll be better explaining this. But that's the condition of the Palestinians in Gaza during the March of Return, when Israeli soldiers, snipers, targeted the knees of the protesters, all the reproductive organs of women, snipers in particular, and I've seen this when I went to Gaza. Even on checkpoints, holding people, that is the torture, I would say. Not let them die, but being tortured. Okay. We want to give time to the people.
We have
To
two more.
speak and to
We have
ask.
two more quick questions. Oh, one you've
Yeah.
already talked about. We only have two more quick things.
Okay.
You've already talked. Do you want to mention, because you talked about Canada Park? This is the site.
Yeah, no, this is not
No?
the site.
Oh, it's not the site.
The site of Canada Park is inaccessible for Palestinians. The title of the book, Driving in Palestine, as I said from the beginning, it really is not driving in Palestine. It is just fraction of Palestine that I was allowed to drive, which is the West Bank, Gaza, beyond 1948, not allowed, and the site of the 3 Palestinian villages where Canada Park, not allowed, so the West Bank only. Now, after 2002, this road was open. It's called the Valley of Fire, and it is between Bethlehem and Ramallah. Bethlehem and Ramallah, historically, they have one street that connects them through Jerusalem. The Israelis closed the road through Jerusalem, and Palestinians were forced to go through this valley of death, if you wish, because so many accidents happen here. It's dangerous. And instead of 25 minutes between Bethlehem and Ramallah, it becomes 2 hours, 3 hours. God knows. That's where Rana, my daughter, used to work in Bethlehem and come from Ramallah. She wrote an essay in the book explaining this road in particular and the checkpoint on it.
Okay. This will be, yeah. So the last question. So what would you say, I mean, I sort of asked you this before, to, what do you want to say to all of us that are so comfortable here? Like, I know what you want to say to me. I'll get back to Palestine. But to other people, in relationship to the situation.
in relationship to the situation.
Yeah,
I immediately thought of South Africa, the struggle of the people of South Africa, the Algerian people resisting 130 years of French colonization. I thought of the indigenous people here, 400, 500 years, and they're rising up. So what do I say? I say we all strive to have a peaceful life, a peaceful world, without destruction of the environment, without destruction of each other, without supremacy, without control, without greed, without capital destruction of everything. So solidarity and action, beyond words, action. We need to act at all levels. And any success, any achievement, any of us, these marginalized, oppressed, suppressed, colonized groups achieve, it serves the others.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank